Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to host the start speaking of the OpenBench. And so first, let me spend some minutes to introduce the vision of the OpenBench and why we propose this initial program. And the benchmark is very important, as everyone know, especially in systems. We have the benchmark for our supercomputers. We have the benchmark for the data science. The famous is the ImageNet. Also, as the AI age approach, we have benchmarks for artificial intelligence, such as the machine learning perf. And in the open source ecosystem, why we also need benchmark? Here are some reasons. And as the open source is a hot topic, and in a few days in China, we have the CCF open source conference, and some of us and join the conference and give the talk. The open source have many level meanings, some of the project and the repo, and the addition is the community in the organization level. And the third layer is the ecosystem, society. And a lot of things can involved in the open source. Also in academia field, we also talk open source ecosystem. And for example, Dirk, Germany researchers, he has organized the open source expanded and had published more than 20 papers in IEEE computer magazines. And he has collected the topic of the open source, such as the use open source project, the contribute to open source, and the creating and the leading open source, and the business model of open source, the inner source, and the developing toolings, and etc. And we can remember the sentence from the Kevin, when you can measure what you are speaking about and express it in numbers, you know something about it. But when you cannot measure it, when you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge is of a mere and unsatisfactory kind. That is the fourth paradigm of the research is the data intensive paradigm. And nowadays, we more and more use the data to doing the research, also in open source software field. The other reason we propose the OpenBench program is that nowadays we have a lot of the data. And as you see, and the chaos open source project under Linux Foundations, and he has published the metrics, the landscape, and as well as the tool suite. And with the metrics and tool set, you can collect a lot of the data. You can measure, you can observe the community. And also, and in China, the open source software insight from PingCap also is a wonderful project. He used even the data from GitHub and can visualize a lot of things. Some of the things is very interesting to observe what happened in our community. And also, we have proposed the OpenDig project and the HyperCX project to observe with the metrics data model and etc. And in this afternoon, we have released the Mulan open source community dashboard. And we can use the numbers, we can use the chart to show what happened in our community. But with a lot of the data, we are also missing something. For example, what is the state of our project? What is the health? Is it good or bad? We lack the benchmarks. We lack the reason right? We like this, right? And we like the best practice cases and to tell us what is good and what is bad, how we can use this data to improve the health of the community. So I think this things is very important. So we want to like system to benchmark the open source community. So as we use the benchmark to evaluate the supercomputers, but how? And fortunately, we have a platform, the bench concept, which proposed by the researchers from the systems. Also, with bench concept, it's a platform it including a lot of things. For example, the portal, for example, the conference, and the journal, the publications, and the award, and the testbed. And with the wonderful, I think we can use this kind of system to connect to our open source evaluation benchmarking. And also, the bunch consign proposed some methodologies. For example, this is the benchmark hierarchy proposed by the Zhang Jianfeng, a Chinese academic researcher. And in this benchmark hierarchy, he divided the benchmark into 5 categories. And I think we can use this hierarchy also in our open source open source benchmark problems. And here is the benchmark hierarchy. The first category is the measurement standard. And I think you know the NIMPAC is the most famous for computer architecture. Also, the TPC benchmark is also very famous. And he not only measured the system, the velocity of the system, but also the database, the web applications, as well the big data and artificial intelligence nowadays. The second category is the representative workload. For example, the artificial intelligence performance benchmark. Also, the big data benchmark is also some of the example of the representative workload. And I am very interested in the last 3 categories because this is much more related to our open source problems. For example, the third one is the standard data set. This one is this one is very important in data science with the ground truth algorithm. And I think a lot of us use some of the benchmark in our research field. The example is the most famous example is the ImageNet. Other example including the open graph benchmark, such as and etc. The fourth category is the representative data set. This one is the vertical. For example, in the financial benchmark is very famous. For example, the NASDAQ, right? And I think the chaos metrics with the tools and collected data and belong to this kind of the category. Also, the OpenDigger, the data collected by the OpenDigger project is also belong to this kind of the category. And the fifth category is industry best practice. And I think this is very useful. And we have seen some of the examples in the business management. And in business management, we have a lot of the benchmark for the performance to measure what is success in the business. Also, in computer science, for example, in database, where the famous DB engine, that is the ranking. That is the ranking is the application of the benchmark. Also, I've seen the commercial open source software index. Also, another application of the benchmark to rank which is good, which is bad. And also we have released Open Leaderboard I think we should also kind of the benchmark belong to this category. So these 5 category can have describe the benchmark in a wide application. So the goals of the OpenBench is to promote the sustainable growth and the evolution of the open source software ecosystem by establishing benchmarks, standards, and evaluations. And the forum invite researchers from industry, academia, foundation, association, government organization to join us, and to research the topics around the open source methodology, open source management data standard, and open source software ecological benchmarks, and standard data set, analytic tasks, and indicator systems, and the benchmarking systems, and the application scenarios, and the case of the open source ecological benchmarking. And I think we are so much more things belong to the OpenBench. And so welcome to the first International OpenBench Workshop. And in the forum, we have invited several famous researchers from the industry, foundation, and the university to give us the talks. And I think this is the first one we only invite researchers to give a talk. And maybe next year, we can do more things. For example, we will cover papers. Maybe we can hold competitions. Maybe we can call for benchmark data sets and tours. We can do a lot of things. And we have the WeChat group. If you're interested in us, you can join us. And we also have the repo in GitHub. For example, if you are from outside China, you cannot join the WeChat, you can use the repo, you can use issues to discuss with us. Okay, well, thank you. And I think this is the beginning of what I can say.